Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, as always, let's talk some NFL. Can't wait to talk some NFL. Nothing I like talking better. NFL.
I know. And of course, we're going to talk about Urban Meyer going to Jacksonville. And as we discussed whether or not we were going to record today, I'm like, I don't know that we really need to. And you're like, well, Urban's going to Jacksonville. Like, oh, okay. And then I'm looking over like their roster and I'm like, well, I don't know if any of these guys are good. I remember Miles Jack, but now he is like headed for his fifth year, and I don't know if they're going to pick up that fifth year option, but um, or even if he has a fifth year option, because I think he was a second round pick. But we are going to talk about the NFL. Tom, who knows? Maybe this turns into like a daily NFL podcast. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm still here. Why do you ask?
So while we are recording this, nothing is official, although Pete Thamel has said it's coming. So that is about as official when it comes to Urban Meyer as can be. Also, while we are recording, there has been no word from any of the Ohio State underclassmen about their decisions. We know Josh Myers said he would make his decision on the 12th. He has not released that decision as of yet. There are a couple of interesting names pointing towards coming back that won't really get into here, but if you go to the Ask the Insiders board at buckeyescoop.com, you will be, if you are a member, you already know who I'm talking about. If you're not a member, you should join. You would be pleasantly surprised, if not shocked, like we were at the possibilities of who might be coming back. And something to at least look forward to after such a tough loss this past week. But Tom, I'm pretty sure everybody has moved on.
Yeah, I'm sure no one in Columbus is thinking about that game anymore. Absolutely not. Yeah, people in Columbus definitely get over losses very quickly. That's what we've learned in the past, 30 years or so. So, but I mean, the names that were thrown out this week, both looking like they're going to return. The first one was like, wow, that'll be really helpful. The second one, which dropped last night, was like, really? Like I had completely written that person off as absolutely positively going to the NFL, and now it's like, well, that would be pretty darn big if they got him back, because that changes a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, on both sides of the ball now.
And if people get upset that we're being so elusive about this, it's insider info and it's premium info and people are paying for it. So,
And it's not our info. That's the other thing. Like
right.
we can share our info. We're not at liberty to share other people's info.
Right. So there you go on that. Check that out. It's quite the spicy thing. So Tom, let's get into why Jacksonville for Urban Meyer and whether or not we think this is going to work. Until I don't know, this past, few months, I didn't think he could do the NFL thing because of the losing, because of his offense, and just doesn't really suit him. But after seeing him bring in more of a pro style offense with Brian Day, I no longer think like he's got to have a running quarterback. That doesn't hold me back anymore. I have to believe at this point, if you are thinking of becoming an NFL coach, you are aware that 5 losses a season is good. And as I've said before, he has to be okay with a loss. He doesn't have to be okay with losing. Nobody wants to be okay with losing, but he can't take it so hard as he did in college. But the thing is, you don't have to. So I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg cause or effect. And college losses hurt you more than they do in the NFL. So is that why? Is it the weight of the loss that hurt him so much? Because you can only lose one game. Is it that way, or is it just the fact that he hates losing so much? Or is it the understanding that one loss can cost you and 2 losses you're done?
Yeah, and that's the great unanswered question. And I think Urban probably thinks he knows the answer to that, but you're not really going to know because he's never coached in the NFL. So everywhere he's coached has been college and has been, yeah, if this is if you lose a game, sometimes you said 2 losses is enough to kill your season. Sometimes 1 loss is enough to kill your season. He had a couple 2017 or 2018 team lost 1 game, but that was enough to keep him out of the playoff. And that's, the margin for error in college is so slim with the playoff field being as small as it is. it is like life or death every week for these coaches and players to some degree. I don't know what to expect with Urban in the pros. I think he thinks he's probably going to be fine with it. Probably. Otherwise he wouldn't be doing it. But man, I mean, we've covered several Urban Meyer losses. I mean, I wanted to say plenty, but it's like, well, there are only 9 in his entire time at Ohio State. So, not that many, but you go back to the loss to Oklahoma. He was in 2017. He was really, he gets quiet. You can tell he's really angry. He doesn't want to talk a lot. The playoff loss to Clemson the year before, the shutout loss, like he was furious. The loss to Iowa in 2017 was catatonic. The loss to Purdue in 2018, like much the same. I mean, it is hard for him, and that's you've got to. It's a tricky balance because what makes him so great as a coach is how like singular focused and driven and constantly aimed at perfection he is. But also, he is a burns hot, burns bright, burns out kind of guy. I mean, that's been, everywhere he's been. He was at Florida and he flew a little too close to the sun and burned out. Same thing happened at Ohio State. You cannot do that in the NFL. And like I said, I think he thinks that he can do it. But I don't, we don't have anything that indicates one way or the other whether he actually will be able to kind of make that mindset.
I think I believe coaching in the NFL is easier than coaching in college. And I say easier in terms of you have less distractions. You have less things you need to do. It can just be football. In college, you have to constantly recruit, and it didn't always have to be constantly recruiting, but now it is, and things have moved up. Timing has moved up, and so you're recruiting younger guys and younger. And we see Ohio State dealing with almost 3 classes at a time, and certainly 2 classes at a time, and that's a lot, and it's constant. And to not have to deal with that, I think makes everything easier. And also, it's just football, but then there are no necessarily limits on time, although the players union has theirs, what they can and can't do. But for like the coaches, you can just do football. And then I know he's burned out some assistants in the past in college, but a lot of that I think also has to do with recruiting and just the demand for excellence. I'm sure the demand for excellence will still be there, but there's only so much film you can watch and things you can do, because you can only work with the players so much, because like I said, they've got a union and you have to deal with that. But I do see a way that he can remain healthy in terms of just the overall stress and the hours and things like that. I don't foresee the cyst and the taking a knee because of a headache. I think that's less likely to happen in the NFL until maybe you win a Super Bowl, and then you have to do it again. Like his first problem at Florida, he won it, and then immediately now I have to. There's still that quest for perfection, and I guess at that point it's a good problem for him to figure out how to deal with after you won a Super Bowl. But I do think it will be easier for him to maintain a healthy lifestyle, even living in Jacksonville.
Yeah, it's probably it's going to be at least different issues, different concerns, and like I said, if he can make that adjustment, it's going to be potentially better for him. This has the potential to be a better fit for him than going to coach at Texas and having the exact same stresses and the exact same concerns. This is like sometimes you're ready to have different problems. Like, I think all of us at the end of 2020 were kind of like, all right, I'm ready to go back to having to sit in traffic and commute and like be bumper to bumper. Like I'm ready to go back to those problems again instead of the problems we're having right now. This may be like, you're not. It's maybe a little bit less stressful, or at least differently stressful. Because this is a relatively, as far as NFL jobs go, this is a relatively low pressure job. This is not coaching the Dallas Cowboys or the New York Giants or a really like major market thing where this is like one of the dominant things, like Jacksonville. Like, yeah, I mean, it's the biggest thing in Jacksonville, but Jacksonville's the size of Columbus, and the Jags in Jacksonville, like I know they're popular, but that is not being the head coach of Ohio State in Columbus. Like that is a whole different ballgame. And, I mean, we can get into how this is probably going to go, but you're not replacing Jim Tressel here. You're not replacing, he came in after Ron Zook at Florida. He didn't come right after Steve Spurrier, but you're not replacing Jim Tressel. You're replacing Doug Marrone. Like this is not the toughest ask, to like, well, can I live up to the standards of the guy that got Syracuse to the Pinstripe Bowl? Like, man, that is a tough ask, but I think maybe Urban Meyer may be in a decent place to be able to do that.
Right. You don't want to be the guy that has to replace Tom Coughlin, the legendary Jacksonville Jaguars coach who finished, I believe, 67-60. You want to be the guy who replaced 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 Tom Coughlin. Then now you might have a chance at success. And why Jacksonville? I think there are a number of reasons. For one, I think his family likes Florida. Number two, they have the number one pick in the 2021 draft, which will be Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback of Clemson, who is seen as the top quarterback prospect in the draft since maybe like Andrew Luck. And Andrew Luck was seen as the top quarterback prospect in the draft since maybe John Elway. So that's some rarefied air. Not a bad guy to build around if you're going to just start out your career. I know some people will ask, well, will he draft Justin Fields? I seriously doubt it. Trevor Lawrence has been the guy since about before he even committed to Clemson. Like he was seen as eventually this guy will be a number one pick, kind of like Matthew Stafford was before he was even at Georgia, where you could just there's some guys you just know that about it. So I think there's that. Trevor Lawrence, it's not a bad time. It's not a bad way to start your franchise. And it's almost like a expanding again. It's an expansion again for Jacksonville. You got the new head coach, new franchise quarterback. There is the whole tug of war with like London, though. Jacksonville and London with this franchise, that will be interesting to watch. But if you're going to starting over with Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer, I think certainly creates plenty of buzz, and probably if seats are ever allowed to be sat in again, we'll fill them.
Yeah, I think that London deal expired for the Jags. I think that ended like a year or so ago. But I mean, the owner of the Jags, Shad Khan, is also the owner of one of the English Premier League teams in London. He owns the Fulham Football Club, London's oldest football club, for those who are wondering. That was the team that Brian McBride played for you old Columbus
Crew.
Fans. Yes.
I saved the Crew.
That is my English Premier League team, largely because when we went to London, we went to one game, we went to Fulham. I was like, oh, good. Well, now I have to root for this team that's just constantly up and down from the Premier League to the Championship and back. So great choice, everyone. But so as far as the Jags go, it is like the ideal time. If you're going to go take over the Jaguars, this is the ideal time. Like they have done the tear down already. You don't have to go through the years of tear down and rebuild. It's like this has been burned to the ground. They have one win this year. They were 1-15. They have the number one overall pick coming. They have more cap space than anyone in the NFL does. It's like this is, they have burned everything to the ground. Now they're ready for the build to start. And that's not a bad place to come in, because if you come in and you go 5-11 or 6-10 next year, it's like, oh wow, look at that. That's a big improvement. You have a year to do that, and then get to 8-8 or 10-6, and no one is expecting 12-4 next year. So that's not bad. The pressures of Jacksonville are just it is not that is not a national spotlight job. That is a spot where you can go and take a year and start building your stuff and start building your culture and all that, all the stuff that Urban Meyer always talks about, coming in and restructuring things, rebuilding things, building the culture, getting the buy-in from players, getting the buy-in from staff, all of the stuff, getting all your pieces in place and starting that build. Because they're not making the Super Bowl next year, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think there's questions as to how well this is going to work. It's going to work. It's just how well will this work? This is going to be whether it's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, this is going to be a substantially better organization than it is right now. It's just a matter of, does that mean 9-7 good, or 13-3 good, or Super Bowl good? And that's that's one of those things that nobody knows, because they have a lot of cap space. But if you're a first time NFL guy, it depends on who you're going to surround yourself with, because you can I'm sure I don't need to tell Ohio football fans this. You can blow cap space in a lot of different ways without making your team substantially better. So, that's not a guarantee of success, but it means you're at least set up to have success.
And I know there have been reports that he's trying to put a staff together of head coaches, basically, who have been through this, so that they can help him navigate. I'm just looking at his record at each of his stops, Tom, and so his first year at Bowling Green, or his 2 years at Bowling Green, he finished 17-6. His 2 years at Utah, he went 22-2. At Florida, he went 65-15. Ohio State, he went 83-9. Outside of that Florida stint, I can see him losing more games this year than he did at any stop in his career, because 6-10 would not be a shock, and that would be one more loss than his entire time at Ohio State. It'll just be interesting to see how he deals with that. And I think because for me, you start Trevor Lawrence, we're starting completely over. No reason to let him learn from Gardner Minshew. This is, you give him the keys and you go. And I think you do that with a lot of their picks, because they have the Rams first round pick, which will be, I think, in the mid-20s. We'll see, unless the Rams go ahead and win it all this year. They have 11 overall picks. They have like 2 in the first, 2 in the second, I think 1 in the third, 2 in the fourth, and a fifth and 2 sevenths, something like that. And $75 million in cap space. So it almost becomes this college thing again. Nah, not SEC cap space. Just calm down, Tom. It's not like that, but it kind of is. It goes back to recruiting and development and targeting and talent evaluation. The talent evaluation comes in with the draft picks. I think the recruiting comes in with the salary cap. Can you bring in free agents to come play with you? And I don't know. Winning over the mom does not necessarily come into play anymore for Urban Meyer. And I know some people don't think the way he interacts with college kids, the way he, his psychological aspect of dealing with them, or the way he tries to get them fired up, won't necessarily work with them, or real life Wednesdays, the Tim Kite stuff. He has to approach it differently, perhaps, and we'll see if he does, or if his way of doing it works. But there will still be some college aspect to it, in my opinion, with just putting this team together, the 2021 team together. And I think for any potential coach, that would be exciting, just to see what you can do with all of this availability around you.
Yeah, and Jacksonville is not a historic NFL team that most people grew up dreaming of playing for, and it's not the most cosmopolitan city in the league. But you wonder if, will a Trevor Lawrence be enough to draw people in, to make them want to come? You can fill a whole bunch of spots with that draft if you draft well, but in terms of finding some more replacement pieces, like Trevor Lawrence is the kind of player that I think people are going to want to come play with. Maybe it takes a year in the league for people to really see it. But I mean, this is not some unknown guy. This is someone who's been famous since he was 15 years old. So he is not coming out of nowhere. And I think he has about as stellar a reputation in the football world as you possibly can. So, that may be something where, just the Trevor Lawrence personality, and then, for whoever else they're bringing in the first round, second round, you start seeing guys, when you're in a rebuild process, it's like you start putting those pieces in place. Once people can, getting the first step is you start putting the pieces in place. Then you sort of are finding where the holes are and you're patching the holes. If you've got the first pieces in place and they're appealing enough that people want to come join that, that looks like, hey, that looks like a good place to be, and something, a team that's actually going to be going somewhere soon, then that maybe gets to be a little bit of an easier sell.
And also the way the salary cap is structured over these last 7-8 years, when they stopped giving the rookies these crazy contracts, like you're not going to be paying Trevor Lawrence that much until year 6 because you'll get the first 4 years and then he gets a bump up with the team option in year 5. But that still gives you money to play around with before you have to give him the entire Brinks truck and then you have to start cutting people. But I guess that's another good problem to have when you have a franchise quarterback that you have to give $200 million to or $400 million to at this point. And then, sorry, a couple linebackers, we have to cut you. We can't afford you. And then you bring in somebody else through the draft. So if you're doing this on Madden, like I think this would be a more interesting team to work with, just because there's so much to play with and to do. And I think if I'll be interested to see what he does in the draft and to see actually how much. I guess you have to give him quite a bit of input in the draft. And I know there's been talk about the interim GM, I believe, is Trent Baalke, who they think will probably be the guy. And I know that there are people who don't have the highest thoughts of him as a GM. So again, that will also be interesting to watch. This also begs the question of who is he going to bring in? And I know Ohio State fans, that's really their main concern here is he taking anybody from Ryan Day's staff? And at this point, based on what has been on the Ask the Insiders board, doesn't seem that way. But also, it wouldn't shock me if he went to Mark Pantoni and was like, hey, would you like to come? Pantoni's from Florida. Would you like to come and do this? Find a position for you on a GM track because that's basically what Pantoni does now. He can tell he's an evaluative talent, which you also have to be as a general manager as well, so that you're not drafting idiots. And so he's very skilled at that. The coaches trust him with that. We know how much Urban Meyer thinks of him and trusts him. Is this something that he would want to do? Has he grown tired of? It's a lot more work recruiting than it used to be. Now, that could be right up his alley, or maybe he's looking for a change. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I kind of expect him to stick around, but I wouldn't be surprised if, that would be an interesting or maybe something that would entice him.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that is at the very least flattering and would be at least intriguing, I would think. I mean, our guys seem to think it's not super likely that he would make that move. There's a whole bunch of different things that go into that, in terms of the culture around the building with Urban Meyer versus Ryan Day. It might be just a little bit less of a high tension, high strung work atmosphere under Ryan Day than it was under Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer always believed that people, you couldn't let people get complacent. Everyone had to be uncomfortable at all times. And so, that's not the most wonderful work environment in some cases. The obviously the NFL GM track thing would have to be intriguing to him. The Florida thing, that may be intriguing to him to move back. The other side of the coin is he's an assistant athletic director at Ohio State already. He's making 7 figures. I mean, it's not like he's in a bad spot right now. He's got a young family. He could presumably just stay in Columbus as long as he wants to. Like I don't see Mark Pantoni getting shown the door at any point. Even if Ryan Day goes somewhere else, I think Mark Pantoni would be invited to stay by whomever else decided to, replace Ryan Day. And, so you have some stability, some security. There's no guarantee that Urban Meyer, if the Jaguars thing doesn't work out and Urban leaves after 3 years in Jacksonville, okay, well then you're job hunting again, and then you got to move again. He's got a young family. Like I have a young family. I don't want to move again. Like I moved 6 years ago, something like that, 7 years ago. And it was like, I hope we like it here because I'm never doing that again. Like it's not that fun. And yeah, it's interesting. I think, based on what our guys who, know him a little bit think, it sounds like he's probably going to stay. If he goes, that's a pretty big blow to Ohio State. He is a huge part of the operation at Ohio State. Urban, I think Urban doesn't want to hurt Ohio State. I think Urban cares about Ohio State. I think Urban cares about Ryan Day. It's that may be enough to keep him, keep his hands off the Ohio State staff. You're seeing that a little right now with Steve Sarkisian leaving Alabama. he just hired Alabama's special teams coach. He gave him $1 million a year to be the special teams coach at Texas. And Saban hates that. Saban has gone on the record before that he hates that when people will take his guys. They leave, they coach for him, they leave, and then they take his staff. Like, he hates that. And I'm sure Ryan Day would not be real thrilled if Urban was to take one of his guys. And Urban, Urban has a little bit more of a long-term tie to Ohio State than Sark did with Alabama. So maybe it's a little bit different there. But yeah, that's one of those things where, how much does this impact Ohio State? You tell me where Mickey Marotti and Mark Pantoni are 3 months from now, and I'll tell you how much this impacts Ohio State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said Pantoni's making 7 figures?
I'm almost positive he's over $1 million a year.
Wow.
And an associate athletic director. I'm pretty sure Marotti is as well. I'd have to, I could double check that, but I am pretty sure that's true.
Yeah, and I expect Marotti to stick around as well. It's just one of those things where, even though Urban said Marotti was his most important hire and maybe his first when he came to Ohio State, I just wonder if guys like Marotti prefer the college aspect of strength and conditioning, where you get to see guys grow and you get to actually contribute to them. And it's all he's ever done is the college stuff. And I don't know that he'd be willing to go. And again, as you said, we've been told like Urban isn't really interested in hurting Ohio State and taking anybody from Ohio State. But he does have a son-in-law at Ohio State, Corey Dennis, the quarterback's coach. And there is a wonder, like, would he bring Corey Dennis with him? Because then, along with Corey Dennis, you also get to bring your daughter and your grandkids with you to Jacksonville. But Corey Dennis has been Ohio State's quarterback's coach for 1 year, and I don't know that that's the kind of jump, Tom, that any college quarterback's coach is making anytime soon. Joe Brady, maybe was he the only one? I don't even know how long, but he was also in the NFL before he went to LSU and then went back to the NFL. It just seems like Dennis doesn't have the experience that they would need, even if he has Urban Meyer's complete faith.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm way off on Pantoni. Pantoni makes $200,000 a year, so Pantoni may be in line for a nice raise. Might be how this shakes out. Yeah, no, and it's interesting because you've got the family ties there with Corey Dennis. You've got the relative inexperience there with Corey Dennis, where he's only been coaching quarterbacks at the college level. I mean, this was his first year as the quarterbacks coach, right? Second year, first year,
because Yursich was
he replaced Mike Yursich. So yeah, that's that would be asking a lot, and maybe he's the assistant quarterback coach or something like that if he goes to the Jaguars, and that is that may be more of a personal decision than a pure coaching decision if that's what happens. Not that Corey Dennis is a bad coach, not that Corey Dennis, this is you're just starting out, hiring Urban Meyer was a very good coach in 2002, but you still wouldn't have hired him to coach the Jacksonville Jaguars back then. You build up to the NFL. And Dennis may be a couple of years away from that. He's, the early returns on him have been very good at Ohio State. I think they've been very happy with Ryan Day. Kind of trusted him to work with the younger guys, and Day kind of took Justin Fields this year by himself. So that and Ryan Day is a pretty good evaluator of quarterback talent and quarterback coaching talent. So that should tell you something right there. So yeah, that'd be interesting. He's the one name to me that's a little bit like, if you were gonna ask me which current Ohio State assistant is most likely to go, that would be the answer, I think. But I don't know how likely that is just based on the experience, because Urban has a big coaching tree. So there are plenty of other guys he could bring in that don't have Ohio State ties and wouldn't impact Ohio State at all.
Yeah, and just looking at the rest of the staff, like, I don't see Tony Alford going. Brian Hartline seems very happy doing what he's doing for Ohio State. Kevin Wilson, same. Greg Studrawa and Urban Meyer are close, so maybe. But Studrawa has been in college his entire life. Larry Johnson, I'm going to guess, is probably when he's done with Ohio State, he's done coaching.
Mhm.
Al Washington has no ties to Urban Meyer. He has ties to Ryan Day. Kerry Combs left Urban once. I wouldn't expect him to leave Ohio State to then go coach with Urban. And Matt Barnes has no ties to Urban either. So like the rest of those guys wouldn't, doesn't strike me as a possibility for them to leave anytime soon. So how do you think this is going to go then? I think he's going to do okay. I think he'll do. You've got Trevor Lawrence, and unless Trevor Lawrence is a complete bust, then you've got the first piece. You're putting a puzzle together. You want to find the corner pieces. Like he is like all four corners, and then they say you build around the quarterback. It's almost like you build inside. It's a mixed analogy with the puzzle and how you work around the quarterback. But then you get some offensive line. And I still love what like the Redskins have done with their defensive line. Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat. You just you San Francisco as well, and it seems like get you a quarterback, you get you a defensive line, and hopefully that quarterback doesn't get killed because you haven't focused enough on the offensive line. And then Jacksonville still needs weapons, but yeah, I don't know what the schedule looks like, and I'm not an NFL prognosticator. But I have to assume he's going to be better than Doug Marrone or, is Rich Kotite still available? Guys like that. All of these NFL retreads.
All of the great one-win coaches in NFL history. Rich Kotite, Doug Marrone. Yeah, I don't know exactly what their schedule is going to be. I feel pretty confident in saying it's going to be a fourth place schedule, which probably helps a lot. You're not getting you're not getting the top teams in the other divisions. You're getting the bottom teams, which will obviously help. And they're in the division with aren't they in the division with the Texans and the Colts? And I mean, there's a bunch of I think the Texans might be bad for a while. That's my informed opinion on the NFL, because while the Jaguars have $76 million in cap space, the Texans have no draft picks and are also like $20 million over the cap. So
is that bad?
Deshaun Watson wants out. So yeah. So you probably got 2 wins right there. So there's 2. You've doubled your win total for this year, and you've only played 2 games. So yeah, I think that just culturally, it's going to, he's going to tighten things up. I mean, you go from Ohio State 2011 to Ohio State 2012. 2011 was a mess for a million reasons. 2012, they go 12-0. I mean, it wasn't like the personnel got markedly better. It was just cultural and just, okay, here's the expectation. And it swung like that from one of the worst seasons in the last, 50 years for Ohio State to undefeated 12-0, and would have been playing for a national championship if they had been bowl eligible due to the whole stuff that ended the Jim Tressel era. So, and they probably win that national championship because they would not have been playing Alabama. They would have been playing Notre Dame, and that was the Notre Dame team that got derailed by the whole Manti Te'o thing right before the national championship game and just completely no-showed against Alabama. So that was a national championship game that was much less competitive than this year's national championship game. That's any indication. So, yeah, I think, you can only do so much. He's not going 1-15 to 13-3 in 1 year, but 6, 7, 8 wins next year would not be crazy. And get to 6 or 7, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, then you're a couple free agents away from maybe being, and another year of development for Trevor Lawrence away from, okay, then you go from 7 wins to 10 wins. And then you're all of a sudden you're a playoff team. And, and then all of a sudden that team looks a little different. It's not, and then you're more attractive to free agents, and your quarterback's still cheap, if in your 3rd year, 4th year, your quarterback's still relatively. So yeah, this is, he's getting in there, the perfect time. I think it'll, Shelly's obviously going to be very happy to be able to have her inflatable flamingo in the pool for 9 months a year instead of 4. So that'll be good, I'm sure, for the happiness on the home front. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how he's going to handle the losing. I think, if he's going into this with realistic expectations, then I think he's set up to really succeed. It's going to take a little while, but I think he's set up to, at least be a, 12-win division winner kind of team at the very least, once he gets things cooking, if Lawrence is what we think.
I also think it's easier to build a culture when you're starting over, when you're taking over 1-15 team, as opposed to a 7-9 team that just had a couple of bad things happen and they would have been in the playoffs, and the veterans think they know what they need to do, and they're not as receptive to a coach or a direction. But when you're 1-15, well, clearly you didn't have the answers. And if you think you did, then why did you finish 1-15? And so you're more willing to try other things, I think. And I'm sure Urban Meyer will be trying other things. So Tom, I think that'll do it. Do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I think that covers it. There's our NFL episode for the year. Well, hope you guys enjoyed. We'll have probably a whole lot more. We'll have more NFL talk next week, but it'll be much more Ohio State centered on NFL talk when we sort of get more answers on who's coming back and who's not. Because man, this is going to be a fascinating offseason, because there's going to be, who's coming back, who's not for the NFL draft, who's hopping in the transfer portal, who's coming in the transfer portal. I mean, this is going to be, this is, talk about NFL free agency. This is going to be college football free agency this year. People talk about that as a bad thing, but it's going to be fascinating to see how this all shakes out. Because I think, this is, some of the issues that Ohio State has, and we can talk about this more next week, but I think some of the big glaring holes that Ohio State has are not places you would normally think, okay, well, you can patch that in 1 year with a recruiting class. But if you can bring in someone's, third year player who, is probably a little better than he, better than the place he landed, someone who might have been a little under recruited and has turned out to be a better player than people expected, you might be able to patch some of those holes pretty quickly. And based on some of the names we've heard in terms of coming back, like that 2021 season might be real interesting in Columbus again.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a crazy offseason. And honestly, no better place to follow it than the Ask the Insiders board at BuckeyeScoop.com, honestly, because there are going to be names flying all over the place. And first place you'll see it is there. So check that out. Become a member if you're not. If you are a member, you know what I'm talking about, and you're probably refreshing at a very fast pace. So thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you tomorrow. No, Tom, I did not mean tomorrow.
Please no. The show is Buckeye Weekly, not Buckeye Daily. We'll talk to you next week. How about
next week? How is that? Well, we'll see you guys then. Wow.